for calling me on that. All right. This that brings so this is my first meeting to run, and if I screw it up, Wayne, please don't hesitate. But I think it's time to call the this special meeting of the Eaglecrest Board of Directors to order. Um, and with that, I think we can move into a roll call. We have Thor Lindstrom, Wayne Stevens, Kevin Crine, Sean O'Neill, Jim Calvin. Um, is Hannah in the lobby? Do we see Hannah at all?
I think she's absent for the next meeting or two.
Right. Well, we had talked about a possibility of her coming, and then we have Aaron Lupro and Marissa Cares from Eaglecrest. Marissa, thank you for running the meeting today. Um, so with roll call completed, we would need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda for the January 22nd Special Eaglecrest Board of Directors meeting.
Any dissent? Hearing none, motion passes. That takes us to public participation.
Hold on.
Brandon, you might, when people come on, just ask them to identify themselves for the record.
Thank you for the reminder. Sounds like we have Mr. Harris. And if he can hear us, Mr. Harris, please identify yourself for the record.
Yes, thank you. My name is Rick Harris. I've sent a skier at Eaglecrest since about 1978. I don't even count the years anymore. I've sent you both, you all letters, regarding the mayor's proposal to convert the Eaglecrest to a advisory committee. And I'm very strongly suggest that that's a bad idea. And to that degree, appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing. And frankly, a top drawer team of people that are leading Eaglecrest. I won't belabor that. Going on to the recruitment process, I also sent you a note, which was actually a memo I wrote in 2014 regarding or not 14, 2022 or 24, I'm sorry, regarding recruitment. I won't belabor that other than to suggest that when you're using the city's HR department as part of the recruitment process, my feeling was the process was that the board delegated a lot of its responsibilities to the city for the hiring of a GM. And I think that the board needs to have a much more hands-on experience and participation in that. So I've written that all out in my memo, but I won't belabor it. But I did want to at least remind you that it's there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Rick is fine.
Thanks, Rick. All right, I'll drop the formality and go with first names moving forward.
Am I visible and are you hearing me?
We can see you, Deborah.
Okay, thanks.
Deb?
Thanks. This is Deb Craig, and I appreciate this meeting tonight because I'm very excited to hear what the EBD thinks in terms of this move from an empowered board to an advisory committee. And I sent a letter today as well. You can all read that. I think you all know what my stand is. I really support the board remaining as an empowered entity that has control over the ski area and the gondola project. I only wanted to point out that in my letter, the CBJ is engaging in a comprehensive planning process right now. And if you took a look at my letter, I dropped in a slide from the CBJ comprehensive plan in which they commented on the key takeaways. What is your vision for Juneau? And the number one item under Parks and Recreation was Eaglecrest. Eaglecrest is a really well-loved recreational facility in this community. I think you have a lot of support to remain empowered, and I hope the EBD feels the same way. The other thing I wanted to say is you've talked about some things at the last couple meetings. One of the things you talked about was reopening the pass process. I almost bought a pass today. I declined to buy a pass this last fall. I was one of those people after having bought a pass for decades. And I almost bought a pass today because I thought, wow, this new A-Team empowered board, this new sort of focus we have on moving forward is so inspiring that I want to buy a pass, but I also want to wait to see what the city does with regards to this advisory versus empowered process. So I think, Mr. Calvin, you suggested that we reopen the pass process, like tier 1, to see if we can encourage those 1,000 people that didn't buy a pass this last fall, like me, to come to the table in support of Eaglecrest. I am more than happy to do that with tier 1, tier 2, or whatever prices. I would really like the ski area to survive and thrive and do well and continue on to the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Emily Wright's going to pop up as a panelist here in a moment, and that's in preparation for a later agenda item. So.
Maybe. We can continue with public participation while I.
Okay.
Oh, there she goes. Okay.
And it looks like Deborah is now a panel, or Deborah is still
Panelist.
a panelist, not Emily. All right, everybody, just thanks for your patience. We're working out a bit of a buggy Zoom, and we'll get squared away here in just a moment.
At least we're not on Teams. They crashed today.
Or did they?
Microsoft lost Teams and a whole bunch of their email servers.
Oh, that's no good. Well, it didn't happen while I was on it, which maybe could be good or bad, depending on how you look at it.
There she is. All right, we are good.
All right, back to public participation.
Can I just ask how many people are in line for public participation? Like,
42.
okay.
All right.
Oh, we have one more. Oh,
Hope somebody packed the lunch. So,
yes, Susan, or no, Susan? Raise your hand again.
Emily, thanks for joining us, by the way. Is it appropriate for me to make a comment about public participation while we're waiting? Wayne, you seem to be the Robert's Rules of Order expert in the house. Um,
You can make any comment you want as a chair. It's on the record, so
yeah, fair enough. I just want to, for those of you in line for public participation, we aren't going to set a time limit tonight. But just keep in mind, as Kevin just found out, or we all just found out when Kevin asked, there are over 40 folks in line for public participation. And so we want to get everybody through and try to get out at a reasonable time, even though the topic's very important. So just please bear that in mind.
It looks like Susan should be good to go.
I'm just in support of the board. I think that you're the most informed about what we're doing here. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan.
That's all. I didn't realize that if I raised my hand I was supposed to speak. I'm just listening and I'm in support. I just don't want to lose this place. I wouldn't normally participate, but I care. So here I am. Okay. I'm gonna put my hand down. Thank you all.
Thank you, Susan.
See? There's no other hands raised now.
No other
So-
hands raised?
No.
I didn't mean to scare everybody off. All right. Last call for public comments. If you have public or if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. We'll give you a few more seconds to get noticed by Marissa there. And she doesn't see a hand raised in a couple more seconds, then we're going to roll on to the agenda topics.
And I definitely didn't mean to discourage public participation by asking how many people were in line. So it would be great to hear what people have to say.
Yeah, we definitely, one of the reasons we're holding this meeting is to hear what people have to say about the announcement made by the mayor last week and what things look like moving forward. So, but if you're just curious about what we have to say, we'll certainly get there soon. So, all right. Anybody else, Marissa, or is that it?
Mary Frances just
Mary
popped up.
Frances.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Who, please announce your name.
Yeah, this is Mary Frances. I got a cold. No, this is her husband. Yeah, we've been talking to a lot of people in town.
Can you announce your name though, please?
Yeah, Bruce Creeks.
Bruce, thanks.
Yeah. And most people that we've encouraged to participate today and follow this meeting are all pretty much of the same mindset of, we got to do everything we can to keep the empowered board. I think if we lose the empowered board, we lose a lot of control over the future of Eaglecrest, where the city kind of has done the same thing with the docks and harbors, where docks and harbors finally starts to make a little bit of money and the city gets their grubby hands on it. And we want to keep any future monies that we could make off the gondola. I think it's important that we keep it to be able to roll it back into the infrastructure, the rest of the infrastructure, as our last GM was planning to do. So really important to keep the empowered board. And like Susan said, we're really happy with the current board so far. And go man, go. We got your back. That's it.
Thank you, Bruce. Bruce, thanks for providing comment tonight.
It's a pleasure.
We do have a couple more. One second.
Can you hear me now? This is
Can you
Gary
hear me,
Mendon.
Gary?
This is some perspectives from the time at the ski area where dinosaurs roamed the earth. I was business manager at the ski area for about 18 years. And what I'm seeing from my perspective is a structural problem. Back in the old days, there was a ski area manager, there was a mountain operations manager, and then there was also a full-time business manager. And when I look at the job description for the ski area manager, you've got them spread so thin that they're not really able to accomplish a lot. Back in the old days, the business manager did most of the financial management, did a heck of a lot of the planning. And when it comes to capital projects, you've got to be planning and getting things done all winter long. You can't wait for the operations to end to get things rolling. And so if you can somehow convince the assembly and figure out a way in the budget to do that, I think you'll be much better off. A couple of years ago, before Mr. Simmons was hired on, I sent a 3-page letter to Mike Satry at the time, and I can resurrect that and send it out to you. And it gives a whole bunch of different examples of how a full-time business manager actually served the ski area well, whether it was fuel pricing. Um, there's some controversial things in there about alcohol sales. My perspective was in talking to the insurance folks, they really sharpened their pencils when it came to bidding for Eaglecrest insurance just because there was no alcohol involved. So I think if there's any way to back out of the whole alcohol situation, I think you would see your liability insurance drop precipitously. And that's about it for me.
Gary, please do share that letter with the board. I personally would really appreciate that insight.
Will do.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Dan, please state your name.
This is Dave Scanlon calling in. I just wanted to chime in real quick and just express my support for the board retaining their power and autonomy. I think this is really important going forward, and you guys are going to have a really tough couple of years ahead of you, budget-wise, preparing the budget, getting ready to get the gondola online, hopefully. We know the budget without gondola revenue is very, very challenging with all the needs that you guys have. So I really think it's important that you guys can continue representing the users of Eaglecrest. You're very much more in touch with ski culture with what the community wants to see out of the area. And I commend you for all the work that you guys are putting in right now. So I hope that you guys can stay the course. Hopefully we can speak some reason to the mayor and get her to put a pause on this and let you guys show your leadership. You're a very new board, and a lot of us locals have a lot of faith in you. We know you guys can get this whole thing back on track. So just wanted to chime in, express my support for all of you guys, and thank you for all of your work.
Well, thanks for your comments, Dave. Appreciate it.
Hello, am I coming in?
Yes, please state your name.
You bet. This is Dave Hanna. I'd just like to echo everything that Mr. Griggs said and everything that Mr. Scanlon said, uh, and Deb also. I do agree with Mr. Mendeville that you need a business manager. I don't agree with him about not having the pub back in place. I think that was a real draw. But I'd like to add one third thing, and I'm not asking you to take a position on this, but I think it would be entirely appropriate for you to invite Mr. Pierre, McHugh Pierre from Gold Belt, to come and talk to you and explain to you what he might be able to offer Eaglecrest. Um, he has a really good vision and he is a very capable individual. His operation is very capable. And I think it would be entirely appropriate for you to at least invite him in and sit down and listen to what he has to say. Because with all the things that are going on in Juneau these days, that may be a viable option. And I think at least you should entertain it. So with that, thank you very much for stepping up and being willing to try and put things back on track. And like Bruce says, yeah, we got your back.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate the comments.
I think we are good to end public participation.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for your comments. You're seeing nobody else with a hand up. We're going to move down the agenda. So that brings us to our discussion of the mayor's proposal to transition the Eaglecrest board from empowered to advisory. I think this is the first chance that the board has had to get together and discuss this as a group. And I just want to start with a couple of comments, I think. From my perspective, in the midst of the mayor making this announcement last week, I think the board's real focus needs to be on what we can do to keep moving forward to really be an effective, empowered board. And right now, our priorities are really supporting our acting general manager and her team, working with her to develop a strong budget that is responsive to the needs of the assembly, the community of Eaglecrest, and getting that budget approved and submitted to the assembly. Staying engaged in gondola planning so that we have a sustainable future, but also being prepared to propose a path forward and move forward if we don't get a gondola. I mean, that decision is still ahead of us. And I think as an empowered board that really understands the community and the needs of Eaglecrest, like our public participants said, we are the best position to find a way forward for Eaglecrest and instill confidence in the assembly. And we need to move forward with our GM recruitment. We need to find a strong long-term leader that's comfortable making community conscious decisions and capable of leading the ski area through this period of evolution we're in now, and that's comfortable with some degree of uncertainty. And then we need to find a way, I think, as a board to communicate our drive and our direction to the assembly so that they know we have focus and that they can count on us to effectively guide Eaglecrest through the days, months, and years ahead and all the decisions we have in place. are in front of us, and challenges. So, with that, I want to, I think we should talk a little bit about how we communicate that to the assembly. I have some ideas. But with that, I want to open the floor to discussion from the board members and comments. So with that, I think, Kevin, you have your hand up. Let's roll with you. You're muted, Kevin.
Oh man, I just said something really profound, but now I've lost it. But well, I mean, I guess I just want to give a little bit of my take on the mayor's proposal, and I think, I mean, we all understand that Eaglecrest is in a bit of a tough spot, right? I mean, we have some equipment that really needs to be updated. We have some buildings that really need a lot of work. And honestly, we have a continuing problem with staffing at our current level of funding. With that, I think I can see and understand why, from the mayor's perspective, changing to an advisory board seems like a good idea. I mean, it makes it easier to make fast decisions. It makes it more efficient, and honestly, boards are difficult to deal with. I mean, we have that. At the same time, I think it's an absolutely that over the long term, it will be a very bad decision, and that it at least when it comes to the interest of Eaglecrest and our community, or the skiing community. And really that's because, yeah, the board's job is to, I think, to be in touch with the skiing community and to try to serve that community, but then also to balance that with responsible decision making, responsibility with the budget, and making sure that things are run in a way that doesn't impact the safety of users. But really the board is in a much better position to do that than the assembly would be. And if you think about Eaglecrest, because I was just kind of thinking about the history of Eaglecrest, and Eaglecrest has, I mean, we serve such a wide range of skiers. And I mean, we've produced, professional level athletes and elite ski racers and free skiing competitors. And we've also, have a general kind of serious skiing adult community that we hear from a lot. And then we also have we've done a really good job with entry-level skiers and education programs and making skiing accessible. But I think that it's I guess I mean, to be honest, I don't see the assembly over time and over with different types of with different makeups of assembly members having that commitment to really try to serve the full skiing community. And that's what worries me. Even if the current mayor and current assembly um, does support Eaglecrest, it doesn't guarantee that into the future the way that an empowered board does. Um, the other thing is, I think that, it's no secret that there's been discord in the ski community over the past 2 years, right? We've had a lot of disagreements, a lot of people unhappy with the board, a lot of people unhappy with decisions that were made. But I really think that's a kind of temporary situation, and one that we see starting to resolve itself already. And to try to make, I mean, the actual situation with Eaglecrest needs, the situation with the ski community's needs, these are things that can be fixed, but they're really temporary problems. And the idea of a permanent kind of solution, permanently changing the structure, a structure that's worked really well for a long time, I just think doesn't make any sense. It seems a little bit reactive, and yeah, and like I said, it's going to lead to a ton of problems. The other thing is, I mean, I think that we as a board probably, and as people have commented here and in a lot of, I guess, interactions I've had with the community, people are really happy with the current board. I think we're a strong board, and there are people, the type of expertise on this board is really impressive. And it would be hard to compete with that with any kind of makeup from the assembly, or if we didn't have that decision-making power. But the board could, and I think we need to probably work more closely with the assembly and work better with the assembly. Um, and the last thing along those lines is Eaglecrest has a lot of problems, but we don't need to fix them all at once, right? We don't need to get $100 million next year in order to fix everything. But we need to start working toward having things being in a better position. And we also, as I think this board knows and feels really strongly, if it's possible to get the gondola up and online and making money, we'd have to do it. It's just we made a commitment to this a while ago, and it's been a struggle, but we need to keep pushing it. And I will make kind of one more point that is a little bit more directed maybe toward the assembly or anybody who's listening to this, that it just seems to me like I can't understand why the assembly would want to create such a political nightmare for themselves. I mean, everyone I've talked to is absolutely against this and keeps telling me, making comments like Bruce Griggs just made, just saying, yeah, we're here, we're active, we're supporting the board. And I really worry that perhaps the assembly, I mean, we've seen over the last 2 years as a board how politically active the ski community becomes when they're unhappy with a decision. I just can't imagine the assembly actually wants to start every meeting with 100 public comments about Eaglecrest. And it seems to me like the board is actually a much better place for that to happen. And um, anyway, I guess I'll wrap it up there, but it really does seem to me like I hope that um, this whole idea just gets dropped. I mean, I think we have a lot of really important work to do, and it's a huge political distraction. I mean, it really takes away from the work that we should be doing, and honestly, that the assembly should be doing, and to have to kind of step in and try to make this big structural change right now seems like it's kind of yeah, it's just a mistake. But okay, that's what I think anyway.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Kevin. And Jim, I see your hand is up, but real quick before we jump over to you, Jim, I wanted to acknowledge that Municipal Attorney Emily Wright is here, and she's agreed to kind of show up and answer any questions that we have. I'm sorry, Emily, I should have started with this, and is also open to talking about the process. So, what the process is, or what the process looks like when it comes to when someone's requests her to draft an ordinance, and then how it gets in front of the assembly, and what the timeline might look like, and then talk about how the ordinance might change. And so, Jim, if you can either defer to Miss Wright if you want to hear what she has to say before you make a comment, or we can hear your comment and then bring her forward to talk about that. So.
Let's hear from Emily.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brandon. So I'll give you a big picture overview, and then I'm happy to answer questions if I can, because this is all a bit of a process. So in general, and I'll start, you guys can hear me okay, right? Okay. So in general, when someone requests that an ordinance be drafted, it can come from any assembly member or the manager's office. We will draft that ordinance and it will go most typically to a committee. So in this one, it's the committee of the whole, which is on Monday night. It could sit in the committee of the whole for one meeting. It could sit in the committee of the whole for years. So things first go to committees because that's where you can have full conversations about, is this a good idea? Do we like this? How do we want to play around with the language? What information do we need? So that's the real conversation for the assembly. Committees of the whole are challenging from a public participation standpoint because the public is not invited to communicate at a committee of the whole. So that can be a really frustrating process for the public because they hear all these things but don't feel like they can participate. The assembly tends to get a lot of emails, which they read. Brandon and I spoke about this. You all also are not invited to speak at the committee of the whole. And so I do think your plan of providing some type of feedback to them so they know where you stand. I don't know who's on the meeting tonight, but it's a really good idea because your voice is important, as is the public. So there are ways, but you're not invited to speak at the committee of the whole. Let's say they're completely happy with the ordinance. They want to move forward with it. The general flow is it will go for introduction, and then the next meeting would be public hearing. So in this case, the fastest anything could happen is the Monday is a committee of the whole. It would get introduced on February 9th, and then a month later, it would go to a public hearing. Public hearings can be 1 hearing, 2 hearings, 3 hearings. It really just depends on how much public participation there needs to be, or if the assembly is ready to vote. Things can get sent back to committee at that time if it's not ready. Or let's say there's a vote, they vote to unempower the board. That ordinance is then effective 30 days from that date. So the soonest anything would happen, if it just went through, on the fastest track is April 9th. At that point, you would be looking at the ordinance going through. As you know, the ski area board was created by a vote of the citizens, and that board is required in charter. But your powers and duties are created by ordinance, and those powers and duties are established by the assembly. So the ski area board, unless there's a charter change, which requires a vote of the people, the ski area board always has to exist. But you can be moved to an advisory role. You could be, and you can also be moved to anything in between, right? So like there's a lot between empowered and advisory. But what we're looking at now is an ordinance that moves you to advisory. I think that the ordinance and the packet will be up tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon. That's my understanding. The manager will have a memo that will also go with the packet. But the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee is a good place to look because that is an advisory board. So if you're curious about what an advisory board looks like already, that's a good one to look at. The other challenge then becomes what to do with your general manager, because again, Parks and Rec is a good example. There's a director of Parks and Rec. So we have to shift the general manager into basically a director position. So that is the 2 things that the ordinance that I'm working on would do. It defines your powers, it moves you to an advisory role, and then it moves the GM position into a director position under the manager. So it looks more like a city department, again, more like Parks and Rec, or any other city department. That's the basic. Brandon, was there anything? That's the basic. Was there any? Oh, I know. I wanted to tell you. I know this has come up a couple times. And Angie Flick, the city finance director, is not on. But in 1987, after the vote, Eaglecrest was changed to what's called a special revenue fund. So nothing in what this ordinance does changes that special revenue fund. That special revenue fund still exists. It can be changed. That is something that could change. Nobody has asked me to change that or asked Ms. Flick to change that. What that means is any money that goes to Eaglecrest still stays within Eaglecrest versus maybe getting swept into the bigger general government pot. Again, it can be changed, but no one has asked for that information. Nobody's asked us to do that at this point. So I don't know. I think that will be probably part of the conversation on Monday night or down the road if something like this happens. But it is what's called a special revenue fund. It's different than general fund. Brandon, did I hit on everything that you wanted me to touch on?
You did, Emily. Thank you very much. I'd like to, if you don't mind, open the floor for questions if you're
Sure.
available for that. So does anyone have questions for Emily, or do we?
And I'll stay all night. I mean, so
Okay.
if you guys think about stuff, I mean, that's a lot to throw at you and you have a lot of conversations to have. So
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, I don't see any hands, Emily, unless I'm missing somebody because I have an oddly limited screen width for. Oh, Jim's got his hand up. So go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. That's really helpful background information. Appreciate it very much. I spoke with the mayor briefly today. Um, I'll preface what I'm going to say by noting that she's a friend of Eaglecrest, been a longtime supporter of Eaglecrest, and I truly believe has the best interest of Eaglecrest in mind. But she truly believes that this shift to an advisory board is the only way that she's going to secure um, adequate support for continued funding of Eaglecrest at the levels that we're likely to need. So she's very serious about this, and if she had her way, that it would proceed at the most rapid pace possible, which would mean by April 9th. I think she would like, again, she believes that she won't get the support for Eaglecrest she needs absent this move. And we'll need to, what that tells me is that our messaging around this is that we're talking not just to the mayor, but we're talking to the full assembly, and especially those people on the assembly that are not necessarily big supporters of Eaglecrest. We need to, I think the messaging, Brandon, you may want to talk about more about this later, but I think there's some messaging that's really important at this. For one, I think it would be a bad idea to disempower our board. It's a model that's worked pretty well for nearly 50 years, and Eaglecrest has been through thick and thin, and we've always managed to make this model work. It has worked better some years than others, but by and large, it's proven to be a pretty successful model. So it's our responsibility, it's our charge to communicate with the assembly and the community that that we need to be part of this solution. We do have some big challenges in front of us with respect to the budget, to the operating budget for the next couple of years. And we need to demonstrate that we must be part, as an empowered board, must be part of the solution. And absent the empowered board, we're going to have a hard time finding a good solution. I think we need to describe that the board is deeply engaged in gondola planning work, and we're deeply engaged in recruiting a new GM. We're initiating some business planning work. And all of that is at risk of completely derailing if we're not an empowered board. So it's an important message that we need to communicate. But, and as Kevin noted, I think our skiing community is a passionate group of people who want to speak to an empowered board. They're not going to want to speak to an advisory board. So that means that they will be talking directly to the assembly. And I'm just not sure that that's what the assembly would want. I don't think the community wants that. The community wants to have its own empowered board, and we need to encourage our skiing community to voice that opinion. The change would certainly result in much more direct engagement between the skiing community and the assembly and the city manager's office, both of whom have full plates. And so again, just understanding the contributions that we typically make to making the ski area run, and the amount of work that's involved, and how important it is that we have an empowered board to continue that work is an important message that we need to communicate. So yeah, I guess that's my point. Again, the mayor firmly believes that she can't get the support of a majority of the assembly absent this change. So our mission, our objective is to develop a message that can reassure the mayor, the people on the assembly who are our supporters, people on the assembly who are not so much in support of Eaglecrest, that we recognize that we've got a tough road to hoe, but the best model is for an empowered board to work with the assembly, to work with the city manager's office, and find some solutions to get us past this next few years, roll the gondola into our future, and just help everyone involved understand that we're working towards a path of sustainability, and with the gondola in a few years that we think we can achieve that. So we got some heavy lifting to do on our messaging, but I think that's where we need to be. Sorry, that's a little bit long-winded, Brandon, but that's my 2 cents worth.
Not long-winded at all. I mean, those are all great points. And I'm taking notes. We'll talk more about my letter to the assembly idea in a minute. I know Kevin's got his hand up, but he has talked a little bit. Is there anybody that hasn't talked that? All right, Kevin, please jump in. You're muted again, Kevin.
Again, you missed the most profound statement. A question maybe it's mainly for Jim, but I guess I'm not sure, or does the mayor think that the assembly sees the Eaglecrest board as having been irresponsible or not being responsible in the future or not being like what I guess my question is it seems to me like if we could actually go to the assembly kind of more hand in hand with the mayor and say, here's this plan, will you support it? Does she still think that the assembly would say no if it involves the Eaglecrest board, or is there something else going on that really makes the assembly, um, I don't know, distrustful or um, not wanting to fund Eaglecrest if it has an empowered board? What's going on there?
I'm not sure I have a good answer to that question, Kevin. I think that for a number of reasons, some of which might be understandable and some which might not be, there are people on the assembly that don't trust our board to navigate the waters ahead. And so again, our challenge is to show that we've got the tools to do that. We've got a good board. We're encouraging a cooperative effort with the assembly, with the city manager's office, but we firmly believe that preserving our empowered board is an essential ingredient in our success going forward.
I think I have a little bit of insight into that just from limited conversations. So I can't speak to what the whole assembly thinks, but I have gotten snippets of information from the assembly and from limited members. But if you look at the last several years, there's just been a lot of upheaval, right? So we had general manager turnover, and then we had a new general manager come in. In the midst of that, we kind of lost our grip on the gondola. There was a lot going on. The gondola floundered somewhat. And then when our new general manager came in, there's just a lot of articulation of just how many problems there were, what kind of dire straits everything was in. There was some messaging that was going around that we need $100 million to save Eaglecrest, or it can't be saved. And I think there's some sense that the problems at Eaglecrest have stacked up over the years, and that all happened under the Empowered Board's watch. And so my sense is that it would be appropriate to provide some context that what is the real situation at Eaglecrest, and how manageable is it really? And do we have a plan forward to bring order and planning to maintenance, to capital projects, to get our arms back around the gondola, to help support the development of a strong management structure and sustain the strong managers we have. And I think we can point to progress in all those areas. I think Jim's involvement in the gondola planning has been, fantastic. We can't discount the work of Craig Dahl and getting the gondola back on track and re-engaging the board in that process. Working with our general manager and the board directly. As far as maintenance goes, I think we can demonstrate that, if we get a strong general manager in there and we think about business support, then we can start, planning our maintenance process again. And so I think there's a path forward out of every problem we have, and that path is easily managed, not easily managed, but is feasibly managed by the Eaglecrest Empowered Board. And that's kind of what we need to communicate because it doesn't take, I mean, if you're not a skier and you haven't been getting up there and having those, wonderful days and kind of, pushing through some of the rhetoric, I think from the outside, it probably looks like a bit of a problem. And then, on top of that, we've seen increased financial need, right? So in the place of, so we're spending, so if you put yourself in a board, an assembly member's shoes, probably looks like we're spending way more money and we're less functional than we've been in a long time. And those two issues are hard to reconcile. So we need to help them understand, how we need to help reconcile that, I think, with our messaging.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Yeah.
Wayne, Thor, Sean, either of you have thoughts you want to share?
Well, I guess what comes to my mind is, and maybe Emily can help this, if we're limited on how much we can talk to the committee, what's our best plan to show that we have, you know, possible solutions to move forward to solve these issues? Is it just community support, or is there a way for us to talk to them directly other than just calling them up and crossing our fingers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, one, you do have obviously the very strong support of the community. Community members should feel like this weekend is a good time to send emails to the Borough Assembly. They do read them and they'll get them before that Monday meeting. So, that's very important for the public to engage. They pay attention to that. For the board itself, you all can submit a kind of position statement or something in writing saying, however you want to say, summarizing from tonight where you are. We understand how we got there, and where we are, and we're willing to work hard and plan on this. So you can turn something in writing. I would suggest again that be done, before Monday morning, because once they hit Monday, they tend to not have as much time to read things. The other thing you can do is request a joint meeting. You have a joint meeting. I think it's a finance meeting March 4th. That's very far away. That's really about the gondola. You can absolutely request a joint meeting to, have an opportunity to talk to them, hear their concerns, and address those concerns. And if the assembly members are open to that, they'll schedule a joint meeting. So those are kind of your options available.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Thor, Wayne.
Yeah, I don't want to leave without saying something. Organizationally, when there's a crisis, you tend to centralize control. I mean, that's that seems to be the motivation for the city right now. And I'm curious I'm curious how they're perceiving what seems to be a large crisis. And it would be nice to have a joint session so that we could address those concerns. I don't have a lot of data to go with. All I know is that they just want to take it. Other things I know is that, yeah, we had a manager, he showed up. It's a pretty classic story in Juneau. Somebody doesn't last a year. That's okay. Everyone has seen that in every business in this town. And we just need to get together, strengthen the position, what went well, what didn't go well, make a couple changes and move forward. So I for everyone else who's listening in the public, yeah, talk to the assembly. Be nice to them. They're listening. We're also reading all your emails. I can speak for myself. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the support.
Thanks, Thor. Wayne.
Yeah, where to start? I came on the board first back in 2007, 2008, and we were going through expansion transitions, trying to raise funds for Black Bear, raise funds for the Porcupine Lodge, raise funds for Porcupine Lift, pay down a very substantial balance in our deficit spending. We were able to accomplish that. We pushed it out and were able to get back into black financially. And so this isn't new territory. And I think the empowered board was able to put together plans and provide direction to staff and management to say this is where we need to go. At one point, we were returning 70 cents on the dollar, which is about double what the pools return in terms of return on investment to the borough. We just went through a fairly significant change in personnel, which will be, it's only been a couple months since we've implemented it, and I think that will be crucial in terms of recruitment for positions, for staff, benefits package that we've never been able to offer before. So I think we're making incremental progress, and to just snap the rug on from underneath us when we need to put our head down and focus on recruitment, focus on a budget, focus on the gondola, just I think adds to the confusion at this juncture. But that's my opinion.
Thanks, Wayne. I think it's good insight. I think so. Emily mentioned that she would encourage us to communicate with the assembly, and if we're going to do that as a board, as a group, we could, of course, each reach out to assembly members individually. But to do it as a group, we need to put something in writing, and that needs to be put together fairly quickly. I would propose, and I don't know if we need a motion for this, but I would propose the creation of a small committee with no more than 3 people so that we can just communicate and get this done quickly. To write the letter, I'm willing to take a first stab at it. I think I would suggest Kevin Krein is one of our longest standing board members and our vice chair, and Jim Calvin as chair of the planning committee, that the 3 of us work together to do this. And then I would also propose an invitation to everyone else to submit your ideas to this letter. And unfortunately, we don't have another board meeting between now and then, so I don't think I can write a letter and share it with the whole board unless it's public noticed. So the drawback of this is that you'd have to trust us to put something competent together and get it out in time. And so I don't know. I think we would need a motion to designate that working group.
I'd move to designate the working group of the chair, vice chair, and planning committee chair for getting a letter of communication and encapsulating the wishes of the board.
So there's a motion on the table. Hearing any dissent or discussion?
And Mr. Chair, I would note that there's a message in there that there's an assembly member, I think, that wants to speak.
Oh, thank you very much. I didn't see that message. And please bring forward the assembly member, Mr. Brooks.
And I would second that. And I think showing that we're unified, I think we're all on the same page, speaks a lot that we have a unified vision and a board that's willing to work together and have the same goal, is important to show. And a single letter, I think, would show that. So I would second that motion.
Well, thank you, Sean. And I think, well, that would make the motion pass. So we have a working committee, and I think we could touch on the content of the letter before we depart from this agenda topic. But I think first we have Assemblyman Brooks, who would like to speak.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. I just really want to say thank you for everything you're doing, and speaking to the proper means of outreach and stuff. I'm more than happy to have a phone call with each and every one of you before the meeting on Monday. Whether I could probably do a couple this evening, and then the rest between tomorrow and the weekend, and that goes for anyone else. We are getting a lot of emails and community support for the board. It's very overwhelming, and that's heavily considered. And when it comes to things that get brought forth, uh, as far as I know personally, it was motion by the mayor solely. If it was in if it was worked out with anyone else, it could only ever be two other members because of OMA rules. So there is a lot of support and recognition of the value of Eaglecrest from the members on the assembly. So just keep that in mind. And yes, please reach out to every single one of us in any capacity, and we'll hear everything and consider it heavily. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Appreciate that. Yeah, definitely appreciate you taking the time to come and comment to us today. That's really helpful insight, and I think you're likely to have some of us take you up on that invitation. So, um, so pivoting back to the content of the letter, I think generally speaking, we've talked, just kind of taken ideas from the conversation. I think the letter could start with acknowledging kind of where we are and how we got here, just roughly outlining the last couple of years, and then illustrating that the current one, the skill set of the current board, like Kevin pointed out, to start with the effort to instill confidence in the assembly of the board's ability to move forward, and then outline the board priorities, and what the board is focused on, and then encouraging and being open to, as somebody noticed or somebody mentioned, greater participation with the assembly. And I think that, there's we have no, I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I don't have any, I'm not frustrated with the assembly. I'm not frustrated with the mayor. I totally understand the desire to save Eaglecrest. I understand the desire to bring Eaglecrest under a group of professionals that you have a relationship with and that you trust. But I think, also pointing out that we have a lot of support from community members that have a lot of credibility too, that constitute the ski community in Juneau. And we have help from them and insight. And we also have a wonderful staff at Eaglecrest, and finding a strong general manager to move Eaglecrest forward under the guidance of the empowered board is really a win-win, because it wraps up strong contact with the Eaglecrest community, the Juneau ski community, which is concerned about fostering growth in the sport, and which is healthy and has good social structures, and the assembly and the management. So anyway, I don't want to lose track with what I'm saying, but there is kind of a general outline there, and so I think, as maybe we could just go around real quick and talk about if there's something that hasn't been mentioned tonight, or if you disagree with any approaches that we were talking about in this letter. Maybe just point those out real quick, and then we could wrap up this agenda item. So,
I think you summed it up nicely.
Brandon, I might add one thread, and that is that, again, this is sort of third hand, and what I pick up about some of the concerns about the empowered board, and that it doesn't fully represent the interests of the entire community. It does a great job of representing the interests of the skiing community, but again, the argument for shifting us and putting the power into the city manager's office is that we're not thinking about the community at large. So let's be thinking about how we can articulate in our messaging that we have the best interest of the community in mind. And a big part of that is just reminding everyone how important Eaglecrest is, and that what Juneau looks like without an Eaglecrest is a very, very different place than it is with an Eaglecrest. So let's, as we think about the message, let's keep that sort of overarching what's best for Juneau perspective in mind.
No, I think that's great feedback, Jim. And that takes me back. Actually, our liaison, Assembly Member Steininger, recalled this in a recent story that Mark Sabatini wrote. But I remember the public comment we had. I can't remember who said this, and so I'm sorry I can't remember your name if you're listening tonight. But somebody equated Eaglecrest to an anchor store in a mall, and I think that was a great analogy because Eaglecrest provides a huge incentive for people to stay in Juneau. And the economic impact of that and the social impact of having, strong, healthy-minded, often, professional leaning or just hardworking folks, coming to Juneau and staying here because we have this crown jewel is hard to understate. And then so that's kind of, I think, where I would lean. Please, if you have other ideas on how to articulate the value of that Eaglecrest represents to the broader community and not just skiers, please share that.
I don't know the
Don't
best
forget all
way
the
to,
blueberry pickers.
yeah, and I don't know the
Yeah.
best way to articulate it, but whether you're a summer user or a winter user, you're passionate about Eaglecrest and the people that are willing to help Eaglecrest, professionals, non-professionals, but I don't I would, I don't see that support for you know, other resources in town. And all resources are important, but the amount that the community is willing to give to Eaglecrest, really shows that support. And I think the Empower Board really helps promote that. People feel like with an Empower Board, they're more involved in the decision making and they're more willing to help when it's needed. And that's pretty important.
No, that's great. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, I have a sentiment to add, and that um, frustration I've observed or maybe experienced myself is that it's hard for us as a city to extract value from the sheer volume of tourism that comes through Juneau. We've seen it with the marine passenger tax, with various collisions with the cruise industry there. How many more options are there for us as a city entirely, not just a group of skiers, to extract some value from that tourism industry? And we're sitting here looking at a plan to sell some tours. And that is probably one of the last options to profit off of tourists as a public entity. So if you are watching this and you think that the skiers are getting more than their fair share, um, maybe we should continue to develop summer operations and stick with the plan that the assembly agreed with.
I think that's a great point. And actually, Sean, and Thor, both of you just kind of built on each other there because the summer value is huge, and I overlook that sometimes. I don't eat a lot of blueberries. My wife's allergic. But also in just being able to, yeah, I know it's horrible. And I just outed her for it. So sorry about that, wife. But the ability of Eaglecrest to extract value from tourism and feed that back into the Juneau economy is a great point too, and not lost. So I'll make sure to consider that in the draft. Um, I think if there's not anything else, just email me. You can email me or Jim or Kevin. I'm going to consolidate these comments. So if you email Jim or Kevin, or you can email any two of us. I don't think you can email all three of us with your idea because then that's four people in the conversation. So try to keep me in the email because I'm going to consolidate the comments initially, and my goal will be to get a draft emailed to Jim and Kevin sometime, some reasonable time on Saturday, and then we'll spin that around and then get it out to the assembly on Monday. And we won't deviate drastically or really deviate from these points. We just can't guarantee exactly how we'll articulate it at this point. But I think at this juncture, you probably know how the three of us spin ideas, and it'll sound a lot like that. So unless we have any final comments, I think we can leave this agenda topic behind. Last call. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your comments and for the public participation. I really appreciate it. And Emily, thank you so much for being here this evening. Your insight was very helpful, and we appreciate your support, and the work you do at the city. So thank you. So moving on, we're at agenda item 2. That's HR and Finance Committee appointments. So we'll hit HR first with Hannah Shively stepping back from her chair duties and her HR committee duties. We need to get a new chair of the HR committee, a new HR committee member, and a new chair of the HR committee. So I'll open that up for discussion. I think, hang on. I'm looking at my notes real quick. I kind of lost
For the
my.
benefit of those of us who can't remember who's on the committees, could you maybe enlighten us?
No, that's a great point. Jim, do you know currently who's on the HR committee?
It is Wayne Stevens, myself, and Hannah.
Okay. Thank you for reminding me of that. So we need one more committee member, and then we will need to appoint a chair of the HR committee. So,
And Brandon, I might offer that I've inserted myself as an acting chair of the HR committee a few weeks ago, and I've been working on recruiting and other HR related things. I'm happy to continue in that role if it's the will of the board.
so I would move that we appoint Jim Calvin as chair of the HR committee so that he can continue doing the work of that he's been doing. He's doing a great job picking up like position descriptions, announcements, coordinating meetings with Dallas, and getting the information we need about pay and just where we can post. And he's really got things moving quickly, and I'd hate to lose that momentum. So I've moved to I've nominate Jim Calvin for chair of the HR committee.
No objection.
All right. Hearing no objections. Making sure that's true. All right. Hearing no objections. You never know who's out there looking to get at you, Jim, but looks like no one here. So Jim, that makes you the new chair of the HR committee. And then we have one vacant seat on the HR committee, and I'm looking for nominations.
I'll nominate Thor.
All right. Any other nominations?
Or still sitting upright, so that's probably agreeable.
All right. So Thor, do you accept the nomination?
Absolutely.
All right. So I move to appoint Thor Lindstrom as our third member, and that doesn't make you third in priority, Thor, but as our third member of the Eaglecrest HR committee. Hearing no, do I get a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Second comes from Sean O'Neill. So hearing no objections to that motion, Thor, welcome to the HR committee.
Thanks.
All right, and then that moves us to the finance committee. So we are down a member on the finance committee. Currently, the finance committee consists of Thor Lindstrom and Brandon Cullum. So we're going to need third member of the Finance Committee. Is anyone interested?
I'll volunteer for the duty.
Anyone else?
Needed. I'm glad to step in.
All right, so does this mean we do it like a cage match or?
Well, if that's the case, Jim wins. He's in better shape than me.
No, this is an interesting thing. So we have two folks. Do we vote on each person or do we?
If you only need three, I'll just,
Okay.
Jim, I'll acquiesce.
Sorry, Wayne, I probably should have left well enough alone when Jim said he would volunteer. I didn't mean to set up a cage match.
No, that's fine. I just don't
All right.
want Jim to get overloaded. I'm just trying
That's
to
what
help.
I'm a little concerned about. Are you sure you're good with that, Jim?
I'm so vastly overloaded anyway, adding another bit of work won't make a dent. So no, I'm happy to
All right.
happy to pitch in. A good time to remind everyone that I encourage everyone to attend all of the committee meetings. And yeah, if you're an appointed member, you get to vote on moving things to the larger board. But I think it's sort of incumbent on all of us to especially finance,
Yeah.
and especially when we're recruiting a new manager. These are all really important things that we should all be engaged in, whether we're sort of formal members or not.
Yeah, I know that when we went through the last recruitment, we really did see most board members show up at most of the HR committee meetings because we all participate and we all have a voice in that process. And then when we get to the board meeting, just to build on what Jim's saying, we don't have to spend time on catch up, right? Everybody's got the context and is well informed. So. All right, I would move to appoint Jim Calvin to the Finance Committee as the third member of the committee.
Second.
All right. Any dissent? All right, motion carries. So that puts Jim Calvin on the Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee is now me, Thor, and Jim. And then HR Committee is Jim. Wayne, you're on did we say you? Who's on
Yes.
the,
Yes.
and Thor. Okay. I think we probably have room for more committee discussion in a subsequent meeting. I know that a couple of ideas have come up. And so when we get to our regular meeting, I think I'm gonna have that on the agenda. And but for now.
Can you repeat those again, Brandon?
Yes. The HR committee is Jim, Wayne, and Thor.
Okay.
And then the Finance Committee is Brandon, Thor, and Jim.
Thank you.
And Thor is the chair of the Finance Committee, and Jim is the chair of the HR Committee. And thank you for bringing a special guest, Marissa. She looks.
Yes, sorry about that.
Oh no, that was not cheeky at all. It's great to see public participation.
Well, I was hoping we'd all get pink headphones.
No kidding. All right. So that concludes the HR and Finance Committee appointments. And we can move to agenda topic D3, General Manager Recruiting Process as Chair of the HR Committee. I think this is in Jim's wheelhouse. So Jim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brandon. I think we can make pretty short work of this. As I think Brandon noted, the HR committee met earlier this week and have so far made good progress on revising job descriptions and recruiting notices for the GM position. One housekeeping step we need to do is to formally delegate authority for the recruitment process for the GM to the Human Resources Committee. So we'll want to look for a motion to do that, and then we can then the process will be official.
I'd move to go for it, Sean.
Oh, I would move to delegate that authority to the HRC, work on hiring our next GM and start the recruitment process. as well as, working with recommending final candidates to the whole board. So I would motion to move that to the HRC.
Second.
All right, motion, hearing no dissent. Is that indeed the case? All right, hearing no dissent, motion carries. So the Human Resource Committee is tasked with the responsibilities outlined in the motion.
I'll follow that with a little bit more information. So Dallas Hargrave at CBJ is actually our staff on the project. So there's a lot of footwork involved, and Dallas will help with that footwork. The Human Resources Committee will be very closely involved in the process throughout. We hope to be actually in the field with actively recruiting starting next week. We've got a few tweaks to make to the position description and the notice, but confident that that's going to go out next week. Essentially, it will be a recruitment that will be open until filled. We anticipate that we'll probably want to have the first screening 30 or 45 days into the future, but we want this to happen quickly. On the other hand, we want to be out in the market at the right time, which typically is towards the end of the ski season. So we're gonna punch this along as expeditiously as we can, but take whatever time we need to attract the best pool of candidates. So yeah, stay tuned for more. I'm excited about the depth and the breadth of our recruiting effort, and I'm optimistic that we're going to do well.
Yeah, and thanks so much for stepping up with that, Jim, and also Wayne and Thor as a committee. I'd like to note that sorry, reading notes at the same time, but I'd like to note that and I was here for the last recruitment, and at this situation was very similar. Aaron was acting, and I think the board felt a lot of pressure to get somebody in, and Aaron was and sorry, I'm gonna share some of your thoughts, Aaron. I hope wave a lot if you want me to shut up, but Aaron was at the last HR meeting and did express a lot of support for just holding out for the right candidate. Somebody that is clearly going to meet our needs and that we feel is the strong leader that we need. And so Aaron, I just really appreciate that willingness, and you can cry uncle at any point and let us know that your position's shifting, but I know you love the ski area, and I just appreciate that support. So we do have, I'm curious what thoughts and protocol are around inviting public comment. One more time, we have somebody with their hands up. I think it's in our purview to open public comment up again, but I'm not 100% sure if that's a violation of some rule. Maybe somebody could share their thoughts.
If you want to open it up to public comment, that's certainly up to you. It's not required because it wasn't on the agenda.
Right. Does anyone have any concerns about opening public comment again? Because I think I'd like to give people the opportunity to speak, especially at this meeting. And all right, so not hearing any strong disagreement, Marissa, can you please invite the person with their hand up?
Yeah, my name's Henry Hendrickson. I live on North Douglas. And just hearing no opposition to the idea that the board should be changed to an advisory board, it's fairly obvious. Even watching you guys try to conduct a meeting, you're incapable of conducting a meeting based on Robert's rules. You have clearly no ability to even begin to operate a ski area. So you should allow the assembly to take charge, hire actual competent staff, and move on.
Well, that's great. It's good to get feedback from all perspectives. So Henry, thanks a lot for taking the time to comment today. Is there anybody else? All right. Go ahead, Wayne, or who was about to say something?
Looks like
This is
Gary.
Gary Mindell. The proper protocol is to amend the agenda to add public participation.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate that. Very constructive feedback. So I would move that we amend the agenda to accommodate public participation. Um,
Second.
all right. So any opposition? All right. Hearing no opposition, the agenda is amended to allow public participation. And I think I would need to amend the amendment or amend the motion, actually. Sorry. I would amend the motion to allow for public participation after section D of the agenda and before Board of Directors comments and questions. Is there any opposition to that amended motion? All right. Thank you for that help. We are a volunteer board. Definitely not a professional board, but we are professionals in our other lives. So we appreciate all the support we can get on that front. So Mr. Mendeville, Gary, do you have a comment?
I just had one more comment in the letter you're putting together for the input to the assembly. I just in reading between the lines of all the finance committee packets over the last couple of years, I suspect there is just a decrease in the trust. It's the cost overruns with the gondola and things like that. They don't like that especially in light of the glacier outburst flood and all the cost overruns that they've hit with that. So I think the key thing is to slowly but surely build up the trust. That's something that back in the old days, we got small amounts of money from the city. We spent it very quickly, and then they had something immediately that they could show off and said, look at what we accomplished. And you need to keep building that trust rather than going for big, sexy projects. Do a lot of small, boring projects and keep the assembly happy and keep building that trust. That was it for me.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate the feedback. We see anyone else, Marissa? All right, let's go.
Brandon, there looks to be quite a few hands raised.
Like how many?
Well, right now I see 4.
There's about 4. Rick, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Rick, please state your name. Sorry, I forgot about that for the last two. So Rick, please state your name again.
Rick Harris. My only comment is on the, remember you have a deep bench of people who are on this line behind you that are supporting the board. And what I would think would be useful is if you could put out some guidance as to key words, key things that we need to say, and remind everybody of deportment. You know, and you can remind me too, because I have a bad habit of going a little bit over the edge. But I think something from the board, you know, also working to get those messages out, including even how you reach your assembly member, those sorts of things will all be very useful and having a professional comments from the public. So thank you. Bye. Oh, by the way, good job. Mustaches are good for you.
Words to live by. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate the feedback. What else do we have there, Marissa?
Ed, go ahead and unmute yourself. Where are you guys?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Please state your name.
Yes, my name is Ed Shanley. I will try not to tie up too much of your time because I appreciate you taking the time for the meeting as it is, and I appreciate all the insights that were raised. I just want to counter one of the previous opinions. I I appreciate where the board's at, and I have faith in the ability of the board, and I just wanted to let that be known, and then also just I agree with the importance of reaching out to non-winter users of Eaglecrest as to the financial benefit to all in making the gondola happen. Yeah, I think it's in everyone's best interest. Anyone that is paying taxes to the CBJ, I think it just makes sense. And I will be sure to be writing emails to my assembly members this weekend. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to show my support to the board as it stands. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Thanks for being here tonight.
Hello, am I speaking?
Yes, please state your
All
name
right.
for the record.
Yes, my name is Patty Collins, and I just wanted to contribute a couple thoughts about the letter you're going to write.
Okay.
I think the letter, it would be a good time in that letter to request that meeting of your board with the assembly so that you could maybe hash things out a little bit better. I think that it's also important to realize the assembly members don't know you guys. They don't know what your professional expertise are. So just letting them know why you guys have value on that board and what you bring to offer to Eaglecrest is important because they don't know you at all, you know. And then my third part thought is just that letter is also a good time to really show what you feel the empowered board you're able to bring to Eaglecrest that will be lost, that will be a negative impact for both the skiing community and the non-skiing community if you're only an advisory board. Those are my 3 thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you for the
Yeah.
feedback, Patty, and thanks
Yeah.
for being here.
I guess I just want to add one more thought. I feel like it's a good time in that letter to really emphasize the differences between the 2 boards and why you really feel like you should stay an empowered board versus just, hey, the cheerleader type of message of like, Eaglecrest is great and we can't lose it. You know, I think that is the message that needs to be delivered when they're deciding about whether or not you're going to get funding for the gondola. I think that fast forwarding through that and getting to why the empowered board is preferred would be better use of everybody's time and energy. So that's my input. The end.
Thank you, Patty.
All right.
All right. How many more hands do you see out there, Marissa?
This seems to be the last one.
All right.
Hi, this is Katie Bosler. I just wanted to second what Rick Harris said and Patty just now. We do have a deep bench here. We have people here with decades of leadership experience on boards throughout the community, and also financial expertise professionally. So I just wanted to express my support to keep the board empowered. And I plan to definitely talk to assembly members and advocate for that. Thanks,
Excellent.
everybody.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for taking the time to comment.
Sure.
All right. That brings us to the end of our second round of public comment. Thank you for all the feedback, all of it. It's all helpful because it means you showed up and we appreciate the support. So that takes us to Board of Directors comments and questions. If you still have comments or have some questions, please let them loose.
Brandon, I'll just say thanks in advance to everyone that's going to help us communicate to the assembly. We need to work hard at it. As I noted earlier, the mayor's serious about this and we need to push back as much as we can, and we'll need all hands on deck. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I'll echo that. And I also want to say I really appreciate everybody joining for a special board meeting. And I'm open and willing to, spend my time doing this whenever we need to outside of regular scheduled meetings.
Thank you. All right, I'll just add, I appreciate everybody's comments, and thank you for everyone showing up that you did, that did show up. I appreciate the advice to provide a guidance letter of some sort, but you can also find your assembly members' contact information on the CBJ website. They're not, it's not hard to find, and so I encourage you to proactively get on there, reach out. A lot of what we talked about tonight, a lot of the comments you've heard tonight make up kind of the substance of what the assembly members need to hear and or that I would hope gets shared with them. We're a volunteer board, but we have a lot of experience in our own professions. And Eaglecrest is important to this community. And I hope that we can communicate to the assembly our shared confidence in the board and the governance model and in Eaglecrest's leadership and staff to move forward through this period of time and into the future. This is our 50th anniversary, and we've made it 45 years under this governance model. And there's absolutely no reason that with the support of the assembly and with the support of CBJ and with the support of the community that we can't hit another 50 years. But it just takes us doing it together. And so, but it's also one thing that I've kept reminding myself is that I don't think there's any ill will, like Jim said. The mayor loves Eaglecrest. The assembly members I've talked to love Eaglecrest. They understand its importance, and they have some tough choices. So they need to understand why supporting Eaglecrest is the right choice in a myriad of difficult decisions that they're going to have to make. So thanks for your attention and your time. Is there anyone else? All right, that brings us to the next meeting date. Our next meeting was scheduled for, let's see, I'm pulling up my calendar because I don't have it written down, was scheduled for the 5th. Aaron's not going to be in town, so it's an important meeting. We've got to get the budget in. So we're going to move that to the 12th to make sure Aaron can be there. And so Aaron can take a much needed break. And so we'll announce more on location later. So next meeting is February 12th. And with that, we can get a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the Eaglecrest Board of Directors meeting of January 22, 2026.
Excellent. Yeah, that's seconded. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Marissa, thank you so much for your help. And please, it was a wonderful audience that you provided. So thank you so much. All right, everybody hello. All right, everybody have a great evening.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone.